Haidong! So in this video, we're going to talk about breathing in Haidong Gumdo forms. We're going to talk about the what, the why, and the how of breathing as well. The what is going to be whenever you're in a defense or kenjuk, you're going to be here and you're going to be breathing, right? So whenever you're actually in the middle of combat, you're not going to be breathing easy in and out. Only when you're in a defense here, or high guard, or palsungse. Whenever you're in a defense in a form, that's when you're going to take your breathing. So as an example, taking something from Sangsu 3. So from here, for example, I'm facing off against an opponent. We've been doing a little bit of step work here, and from here, I'm going to strike the sword out of the way, kill, and quickly go back. So at that point, right, so as we're here, I'm constantly exhaling as I'm here, and when I'm back in kenjuk or my defense, that's when I'm actually going to actively breathe if I need to. Sangsu 3 is probably the best one to really play with this idea the most, especially because it's so early. But because this idea is introduced so early in Form 1, that's why this is going to be associated with the white belt form. So why do we only breathe when we're in a defense, right? So like when you're in open hand, for example, whenever you're in actual combat or during a form, you usually have to breathe in with preparation and then breathe out as you execute the technique. But that's going to be a little bit different for Gumdo and swordsmanship in general. So I guess one question is, why is that different? So not downplaying open hand martial arts in the slightest, but when you're fighting with an open hand, obviously the worst case scenario is you get hit hard enough that you perish, but the likelihood that that's going to happen is marginally smaller than when you're working against someone with a sword. So in general, when you're in a sword fight, the other person's also using a weapon of a sort. That's usually what we assume. So the likelihood that I'm going to get cut, maybe even killed, is also much greater when we're using swords. So again, why should that matter whether or not I'm breathing easy as I'm going through techniques or, only breathing out when I'm cutting? So if you're up against someone who's really, really strong, right? So someone who's probably been training and fighting for a very, very long time, they might be able to gauge your ability as you're breathing in and out. So if you're actively breathing in and out and your opponent knows this, if they see you breathing in, they can actually go for a strike and have that momentary extra moment to actually dispatch you. Because in general, when we're cutting, we only want to exhale, right? Because everything's contracting, right? So my breathing's contracting, my arms are, again, the muscles are contracting to push forward, everything's in contraction. As opposed to if you're inhaling, if you want to inhale as you're also cutting, the synchrony is actually going to be very, very off. The likelihood that you're going to be fighting someone of that level, at least when you're training mostly with a form, is not obviously very, very high, but regardless, it's a really good thing to think about. It also, again, helps you stay synchronized with your body and your cut and your breathing. All of that's going to be synchronized if you constantly exhale. So why is it okay for you to actively breathe when you're in a defense? So in Gumdo, when you're in a defense, the idea is I am finishing my combat, and at this point I can take a little bit of breather, kind of survey the circumstances and survey the surroundings. So another way you can think about the defenses in the middle of a form is also sort of like the way we think about the chariot position when we're about to receive information in the beginning of a class, for example. So this is supposed to be getting you in preparation for active combat, right? So again, if we kind of think about what happened with the combination just did, right? So strike, cut, back. So at this point, like, all right, so I just cut this person, they're probably dying there, or I cut them back and they're now flying back, not flying back, but they're staggering back that way. So now at this point, I'll be surveying the circumstances, right? So I know someone's over here, because obviously in the future part of the form, that's where I'm going, a little bit more over here. So at this position, I'm trying to figure out what's going on in the general situation and also be ready for that combat. So another thing that you can do when you're in the defense, so again, it doesn't have to be middle guard, it can also be palsungse, it can be high guard, although it's going to be harder in high guard. So in any defense, or otherwise as well, if you are introduced to the idea and you understand this idea fairly well, this is also the time for you to exert your pressure. This idea is a video in and of itself, but from here, I want to not just survey the situation, I don't want to just react to what's going on, I want to exert my pressure on my opponent, right? So in this part, right, I'm up against someone, I want to force my, again, this is going to sound weird if you're not familiar with the concept, but I want to force my will on the opponent, right? So I'm going to push him in, push, and I'm going to strike, right? So if you're familiar with the idea, this is the best time for you to really actively do it, because at this point, if you're constantly exuding your pressure, once you start initiating your cuts, that's actually going to power up your cuts as well. So as you can tell from the background of this thumbnail, this is intended for white belt. So the idea of this should be introduced very, very early, because it's going to be, once you have that concept, it's going to be in every single form forthwith, right? So with this, so let's take a look at the beginning of Form 1, for example. So from here, again, you're going to be in Chariot. So again, at this position, you're going to be seeing what's going on. You're ready for combat and you're getting yourself ready. And then Chumbi, you're ready to draw your sword. I am ready to actually execute my techniques against someone. So from here, again, someone's coming in. So even when you're here, so think of this also as your defense time. This is your time to also start exuding your pressure on the person in front of you. Again, you see the person coming in. Once they get either too close or you want to keep them far away, you're going to start to draw your sword, right? So exerting your pressure, seeing the situation, right? So if this is Form 1, I see people primarily in front of me, and maybe people to the side. Eventually there's going to be people behind me, but I see the opponent here. So they're coming in, pressure, right? So again, feel your diaphragm, pressure, 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 constantly exhale, right? So again, you cut through, grab, again, even at this position, you're exuding your defense here. So according to the Federation, take 3 deep breaths in, 3 deep breaths out. It's going to be up to your master, or if you are the master, what you want your students to do. But that's the idea, right? So that's why it's so long, is because it lets you kind of survey the situation. It gets you ready for the actual combat, it gets your mind ready. So from here, again, 1 breath in, again, only through your nose, out, here, right? So 3 times, and from here, someone's coming in, 1, 2, 3. And from there, you can keep going. So Form 1 is actually going to be a difficult one to do, just because you only have a few spots to actually breathe, right? So you have it in the very, very beginning here, after you draw in your kenjuk, and the only one after that is after the final crosscut. So this form is actually pretty difficult to actually use all that breathing exercises, but it's going to be really good for you. So a drill that I would like for you to try at home, right? So using this breathing exercise, and because it's associated with Form 1, try it with Form 1. So as you're breathing out, you can either, again, depending on how much you want to go through with this, you can just constantly exhale, and you can hear yourself exhale. You can actually whistle or sing if you so wish, but the main idea is have constant exhalation throughout the entire form. So for example, what I tend to do if I'm practicing on this, right, so take that, so in this very beginning, right, breathe in, get yourself ready, and then exhale, right, defense, and then 1 breath in, 2, 3, and so on and so forth. So practice that, and that will get you better at your breathing during your forms. Haidong!